humans. This is your host, Jeffrey Wu, and welcome to this week's episode of the Human Enhancement Podcast. And I'm excited to have Nelson Dellis, a four-time U.S. memory champion, on our program today. So clearly someone who's at the peak performance in terms of memory, cognitive performance, and probably has interesting stories on how he got to that kind of level. Welcome to the program, Nelson.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So we've had another world champion or a record-breaking memory expert, Dave Farrell, on our program. We can link to that. But it sounds like you've been on the competitive circuit where Dave has been focused more on sort of, one or two world records. Can you tell us about the memory scene or the competitive memory scene? How does it all break down?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just get into the memory techniques because they personally want to improve their memory. And that's kind of where it started for me. But then the problem came is like, how do you measure that, right? Like if I was asking someone to help me improve my memory, they'd maybe show me some techniques, but then where do I take it? Where do I stop? How do I know that I've reached whatever, So then when I found out about these competitions, the U.S. Memory Championship, I was like, okay, that's a great platform to base my improvement off of past records or world records, or if I win them, benchmarking myself against others. So that's kind of what I thought was what excited me the most, and to keep me motivated, especially to train every day to have a better memory.
Yeah, how'd you even get started in this space? So, I mean, some kids grow up wanting to be policeman or a firefighter. Did you grow up wanting to be a memory champion?
Not at all. If you told me that I was going to be memorizing for hours on end at competitions, I would have been like, wow, that's a boring existence, Nelson. But no, I wanted to be an astronaut, actually. Still do, but I think I'm too tall, actually. Anyways, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and she passed away in 2009, which came as a shock to her. I mean, it wasn't a shock. We knew that she was deteriorating, but I'd never really lost anyone. I didn't really think it was just actually going to happen, and it did. And that was kind of like the catalyst. After that, my interest in memory just jumped.
How old were you at the time?
That was 2009. So what, 8 years ago?
Okay.
Yeah. So 25.
Okay.
Yeah. And before that, I loved studying physics. I was good with numbers, but people will say, okay, well, that means you must have had a good memory. But to be honest, I don't think my memory was anything noteworthy, not even with numbers necessarily. So to get that out there, I never had a good memory. It's only until, that moment happened and I decided to find a way to improve my memory. And I discovered this.
And then even at age 25, I mean, this is not, when you're, 12 and your brain is still plastic. I mean, you had a fully sort of formed, mature adult brain usually by 25. So you really, applied technique
learning a new skin.
Yeah. So it sounded like, okay, so your grandmother passing was a catalyst. And how did that lead to go become a champion memorizer?
Yeah. So like I said, I wanted to find a way to kind of measure how good I was getting. And I'd train every day, I'd get better. And I was kind of addicted to the feeling of having this superhuman power.
So the first thing was what memorizing words?
And that was kind of the problem. I was like, well, if I'm going to use these techniques that I discovered, what should I memorize? Should I find my favorite poem and memorize it? Then what? And that's, I think, what really got me hooked to the championship, is because there's specific events like memorizing a deck of cards, memorizing lists of words, names and faces, numbers, what else? Just random information, dates, stuff like that. And that was stuff that I could do every day, little sets of it. And I take notes on how well I performed this day under what circumstance, and then I could see my improvement. And I knew what I had to get to do well at these competitions. And then it was an even bigger goal to just be the champion, right? Kind of a great thing to aim for while just keeping my brain healthy,
Right. So 25, you started looking at memory as something that you wanted to optimize for, and started getting quantitative with it, right? Like benchmarking, hey, I'm memorizing 17 words now, but whereas before yesterday I was memorizing 12 words or something. And when did you start becoming competitive? How, when did it become like, hey, I could be a U.S. champion, a world champion?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was doing pretty good with my training, and then I showed up at the 2010 competition
So
and
about a
did
year
pretty.
in, so like 1 year in, you're like, oh, okay, I could be competitive. I'm gonna sign up for
Oh
this.
yeah. Well, you see, the championship itself is it's kind of small. I mean,
Yeah,
at the time back then, there may have been 40 to 50 people, and it's not a big world. The top elite, there's very, very few,
right.
especially back then. And then the rest are just kind of like interested. They've heard about the techniques, but they're not super competitive. So when I showed up, I thought I was going to have to fight a bit. And I actually ended up in the top 10, like pretty easily. I mean, considering my training.
Right.
But then I lost in the finals off of like an amateur's mistake. And the more experienced guy won. And that's kind of where I was like, okay, I can win this. I just got to take it up a notch. The experience will play in next year, and then for the rest of 2010 and 2011, I just trained even harder. It was pretty intense, and then I won. 2011 was the first time that I won.
Nice. So that's pretty incredible to go from just exploring a space to becoming a champion in this space in a couple of years. So
Yeah,
what did training look like for you? Can you break down your protocols and
yeah. Um, so there were these different events,
right,
right? I knew what I had to get. So the competition is broken up into the morning and the afternoon. The morning is four events, and it's the top eight overall that advance to the final rounds in the afternoon. And so I knew that I had to get certain scores to be in the top
and
round
this is based
eight.
on historical data.
Yeah, just
Like
looking up
top eight is
records.
usually 1,000 words or 500
Yeah,
words. Okay,
and kind of like I wouldn't say manipulating people, but just kind of like poking and probing some of past competitors who were planning to win
all right,
and seeing who they were talking about, what they were doing. Because I was this new guy, nobody knew who I was, and most people who plan to win the championship, it's a lot of talk, right?
right,
It's hard to follow it up with the training. As I've seen over the years, a lot of people have done that to me, and I worry like crazy that there are these guys that are going to be like me coming up, and then most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, nothing comes of it, right?
right.
But anyways, that's what I was doing, and so I would just train those four events. I'd do sets of it over and over and over again until it was just so automatic.
What are the four events? Just make it very
Yeah,
clear.
it's speed cards, which is memorize a deck of cards as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Um,
So
names and
52, so 52
faces,
cards in the right order, and
shuffled. You look at it for a certain amount of time, and that's your time. And then you have to reconstruct that deck with another brand new deck, and
right.
they have to match what exactly.
Okay, and then basically you get a higher placement if the less amount of time it takes to memorize,
Exactly,
and then
yeah.
you get penalized. I guess you get something wrong,
Yeah, I mean,
or
you,
like you
you
just get
first first have to get all 52 cards right.
okay,
Then the speed is the what counts.
okay,
So, you'll see some people go like really fast and then they miss one card.
disqualified.
You're out of, well, not disqualified. You get maybe however many cards. Let's say you got the first 42 cards correct and then just made one mistake
Right.
after that. So then that would be your score, 42.
Okay.
Whereas someone who did 52 cards correctly but took 5 minutes,
I
they're better
see.
than you, even
I
though.
see. I see.
So accuracy wins versus,
Got it.
yeah,
So time is a tiebreaker, and
yeah, exactly.
accuracy is what actually is like the primary metric. Cool. Okay, so that's speed cards.
Yeah.
Event
And then
one.
yeah, and then you do names and faces.
Okay.
So memorizing names, you see these random headshots of people. It's a whole staple packet of pictures. There's like 12 per page, and they have a first and last name, and you get 15 minutes to memorize as many as you can, and then you get another 15, 20 minutes to look at the same kind of group of photos, just obviously jumbled and no names. So you got to write in the names,
Wow.
and you get a point for every correct first or last name.
Wow. And how much is total? Like I guess this big binder full of people is like
Yeah,
hundreds, thousands of
it's
people.
well back then. I don't remember how many pages it was, but it keeps increasing because people advance and
Okay.
push the sport. I
Okay.
currently have the record for that. It's 201 names.
In 15
Um,
minutes. And
yeah, out of a possible 234.
wow.
Yeah, And you got to remember, so a lot of them, I go for all of them, and then I usually make spelling mistakes, right?
Okay.
Like it's Lindsay with an E instead of an A. So that would
So
be,
in a
that's
cocktail party now, are you just really damn good at remembering people's names? So this is actually applied to your everyday life, or is it just like very specific to the event?
no, it could if I try,
Okay.
and I don't always try. So
Okay.
if I wanted to be
Know
better at
everyone
it,
at the party. You could knock that out easily.
yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes I do that, but sometimes I just don't give. I just want to relax.
It just goes in and out of the ear, which I
Yeah,
think a lot of people probably have the same thing, right? Like I just introduced myself. I totally forgot your name before I even like said my second sentence.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's good to know that even a memory champion
Can
uh,
forget.
can turn that part of their brain off too.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
Um,
event two. So event three is
Numbers. So speed numbers. They give you a sheet filled with rows and rows and rows of digits. It's 500 on a page, and they give you 5 minutes to look at it, and you can memorize as many as you can in order, obviously line by line. And then you get 10 minutes to write them out, and you get it's graded by rows. So each row is 20 points, and if you make one mistake on any row, you lose that row. So there's that. And then the last one of the day is a poem. They give you a 50 line random, never seen published poem. They write it themselves, the organizers. And you have to memorize for 15 minutes as many lines, exact spelling, exact punctuation, the lines where they end and stuff. You write it out, 20 minutes recall. And everything has to be exactly the same. If you make one mistake on a line, you lose the points for that line. Yeah.
cool. So I mean, sounds like a pretty good span of digit as well as verbal and word recall, and also and facial recognition, which seems to be like a good spread of types of memory.
Yeah. And what's good about those events, practicing them over and over again, like to train for that, is it's kind of like a good overall practice of your memory muscles. Some people are like, well, why are you memorizing a deck of cards every day? It's not going to do anything for your everyday
Right.
life. And okay, yes, you're not memorizing cards every day, but the practice of how I go about it, which we can maybe talk about in a
Yeah.
moment, that process, if I'm training with the cards, I can get faster at the process. And if I can get faster at the process, then I can do it to anything
Right.
pretty quickly.
Right.
So you're finding different contained ways to train something that can be applied to almost anything.
Yeah. Let's dive into it. So, what are some of the key, low hanging fruit for our listeners out there who are like, okay, I'm kind of forgetful, or I like to improve my memory. What are like the
Yeah.
key Nelson tips here?
Yeah, there's kind of three or four that I like to go to. One is super obvious, and most of the time doesn't need to be said, but in this day and age, I think it helps to say it, is to pay attention and to actively want to learn or memorize something. Without that, you're struggling. Everyone's struggling, even me. Like I was saying at the cocktail party, if I'm in that mode where I just don't want to do anything, unfortunately, even though I train a lot, I'm not going to just absorb it because I'm a memory champion.
Right.
I have to like say, oh, I'm going to do it tonight. I'm going to meet these people and go home knowing everybody's name, or maybe more reasonably 10 people's names or whatever.
Right.
And just that like voice that you tell yourself with, that setting that goal or making it, trying to hold yourself accountable, makes a huge difference with especially memory, because suddenly your focus is wired and,
Yep.
and has a purpose.
Yep.
And with that, that's kind of the root of having a good memory.
Okay, that sounds like a good zeroth order bit, right? Like actually
Exactly.
try to memorize stuff. Don't just
Yeah.
walk in like expecting to just have your brain absorb things on its
Yeah.
own automatically.
Even the people, and I can imagine there'd be listeners being like, well, it's, I just have a bad memory.
Right.
Why would I do that? I forget everything. And so that's like the most self-defeating thought, and of course you have a bad memory if that's the way you think. I would challenge those people to just give it a try, and I think you'd be surprised at how much better, maybe not incredible, but better it would be if you just made that active choice and kind of let go of that
The
preconceived
right,
idea that
or
you're
that
bad.
fear that like you're
The
bad or
fear,
right,
exactly.
right,
Yeah. And then so getting beyond that, that's
right.
very simple. The next kind of step is to think in pictures, um, and that takes advantage of something that our brains are just naturally good at. So when you look at or receive information somehow that needs to be retained, it's often given to us in a form that our brains don't necessarily like to absorb naturally. You know, playing cards are very complicated, abstract symbols, pictures. Numbers are essentially abstract symbols. Lists or definitions in a bio class, a high level bio class. That's abstract stuff. That you have to like read these difficult words and pair it with a really difficult meaning. And if you can turn those complicated things into pictures, very simple pictures, and this can be through association, through humor or silliness, anything that it just reminds you of.
Hmm.
You can see it in your mind. That already is going to be a lot more sticky than the actual complicated stuff that you're
Right.
trying to memorize.
Like is this similar to eidetic memory where like you're just recalling the picture of the poem or are you memorizing for you? Are you like memorizing the words in the poem or are you
Uh,
just like memorizing the image of the poem and you're reading off, in your mind, in your
Yeah,
mind's
I'm
eye?
not I'm not visualizing an image of the thing itself, not
Right.
the words, not the card. It's an associated picture.
Okay.
So if I read a poem and the first like few words says um, uh, like a balloon, right? Whatever. I would picture a balloon, and maybe I would imagine what it would be like to really, really like this balloon. Like
Yeah.
to a point where like I never let it go. I shower with it. I sleep with it. Just obsessed with this balloon, right?
Right.
So that whole image, encompasses those three
That phrase.
words.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of it, obviously, I'm not supposed to write. Say I'm recalling the poem. It's not about remembering the pictures. Obviously, you have to remember the words.
Right.
But as you look at the poem or read it or hear it, there is a kind of a background unconscious memorizing going on. You're just trying to relate it to something that you can use to help you recall it, like a cue,
Right.
right?
Right.
To kind of mesh those two kind of memorizing things
So
together.
you kind of stack up cues then. Like
That's
you
yeah,
like
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's
so
kind
it's
of
like
like
you
just
like you think of a balloon, then you think of the string, the pink string that holds the balloon down to the like birthday
yeah.
cake,
And
and then you just start stringing these images together. Is
Yeah,
that
because
okay?
yeah, because if I look at a page and I'm trying to remember what was on that page and I see the letter Ballon,
All right,
okay, balloon. Um, does balloon have two L's or one L?
two L's, I believe. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, okay.
yeah,
But rather than if you think of the actual balloon, like you said, all the little details, the emotions behind it, maybe make a little funny scenario with it.
right,
That just adds so much stickiness to it. It makes it
right.
a lot more memorable.
Cool.
And then more advanced than that, because imagine you have maybe not three words of a poem, but like 40 lines of a poem,
Yep,
right?
yep,
So
yep.
then you're going to have just basically 40 or more different pictures, right? What do you do with all those pictures and keep them straight? So the last kind of step, we have paying attention, visualization. The last one is storage. How do you store that information in a way that can be easily organized and retrieved successfully later? And that's where you get into more complicated things, which I remember if you talked about it with Dave, but the memory palace or the Roman room method, these are all kind of the same thing with different names, but it's a way of storing information in an order in a very filed manner in your brain um, by using some other ideas. I don't know how deep you want to
Yeah, no,
go,
let's
but
dive into it. I mean, I think it's
yeah,
interesting, the way you explain it, right? Like, I think everyone has their own explanation and their own process how to express it and incorporate it.
yeah, exactly.
I think our I mean, let's dive into it, right? Like, I think it's like clearly you're world class at your practice here, and I think we can all learn and get inspired from how you break down these techniques.
Yeah, sure. So visualizing things is kind of one thing our brains is really good at, pictures, thinking in pictures. And then the other thing that we're really good at, kind of it's naturally hardwired, is memorizing spatial information just without even trying.
Right.
If you can remember the last time you entered a building for the first time, like say it was a new place you went to, and somebody took you outside and said, go back to the place you just were, like say you were in a room there, you could probably do it. Okay, some people get lost, they need directions, fine. But more or less, that there was a wall here, a wall there, the elevators were kind of over there, all without trying to memorize something. That's pretty impressive. And you could close your eyes and more or less figure out where you went and what it looked like inside. Now imagine that for something you actually know very well, like your house, right? You could close your eyes and start at your front door, picture yourself there, and walk through your house. You could do that probably in your office, and there are probably a large amount of places that you could do that pretty well for. So what you do is, for the memory palace, is you take these places and you choose a route that feels natural through it, and you take the pictures that you associated from the stuff you're memorizing, and you place them along the route, interacting with the environment.
Right.
So that balloon, which you were just thinking about all the details, if that's the first part of your poem, maybe you're going to attach that to the handle of your front door, right?
Okay.
And maybe you make some funnier, image of it. Maybe it's the balloon from the movie It, and it just suddenly floats there, and there's that creepy ass clown waiting for you at the front door, and that's it. And so that's the first image, and you move in to the hallway, and you place the next image.
And do you always have the same route when you're doing this technique? Do you always carry the same route? You just put different things on different parts of the house?
So I have a lot of what I call journeys or memory palaces that I cycle through, especially because I train a lot. I do a lot of decks of cards a day. I do a lot of numbers.
Right.
So I don't keep using the same memory palace over and over, because then you maybe run into interference with a past deck that I memorized. So the first time I do a deck today, maybe I'll use my current house. And then maybe for my second set, I'll use, a childhood home. And I have these all kind of planned out. I have maybe 20 different memory palaces specifically for cards. I have
and then
maybe
and you're placing like Ace of Spades there.
Well, the image for
King.
Ace of Spades.
Okay. The King of Hearts there.
Yeah. King of Hearts is my dad, for example. Ace of Spades is Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I picture those.
Oh, okay. So you have like 52 different, like strong, like I guess concepts or people that represent cards.
Yeah. And there's a reason why they represent that card that I.
What's 7 of clubs for you?
That's Batman, like George Clooney Batman.
So that's cool. Like, who's Jack of Diamonds?
Jack of Diamonds is my sister. I'll give you a reason why.
Yeah.
Jennifer Dellis, that's her name. So Jack, Jennifer, the J, and Diamonds, D is.
So you see your sister like hanging out on like the couch, and it's like, oh, like that's the 17th thing in.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so that card, I've trained a lot at this point, so that I don't even think about the Jack of Diamonds. Feels like my sister. It's like looking at a photo of her almost.
Wow.
Because I've trained that so much. But if you can, and that's all it is if you can boil it down to memorizing things that have meaning to you. Obviously, my sister is meaningful to me. My dad, Batman. I grew up watching those crappy 90 Batman movies.
Right.
And so they have a meaning to me because they're from my childhood. They give me a funny, nostalgic feeling. So when I see that, it's a lot easier to remember than a 7 and this little black kind of flower shape we call clubs.
That's cool. So I can imagine. Okay, you can create a similar thing for numbers.
Yeah.
And poems, like there's concepts there. But how do you do it for faces? Right, and faces and names. That seems like it's hard to project a mapping of a random face and a random name.
Right. So there's information, as you point out, that it's kind of, what you're going to get. Obviously, it's going to be randomized, but at least it's contained to 10 symbols, right, with digits, 0 through 9. You're always going to see those. Nothing else. Cards, 52 cards, nothing else. With faces and names, there's almost endless possibilities, right? More or less. I mean,
and it's like continuous, right? It's not a discrete thing you can memorize.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could actually meet 1,000 people in a day versus another day where you meet one, right? So how do you kind of manage that? So the idea is roughly the same. You just make little alterations based on how the information comes, how, the medium of of the information. So names, I don't store them in memory palaces. Rather, I use the person as the anchor. So in the same way that I attach, pictures to like the front door, the couch, whatever, rather than going through my memory palace, I use their face or something about them to be the anchor for the image that their name reminds me of. And the name image coming up with a thing is kind of tricky and takes a bit of practice, but it's more of an improvisation game.
Right.
And some names that I hear a lot, Jeff is a very common, American name, I guess. I have a specific image for it. Like I always think of I'm in the computer science department at a university down here in Florida, and my professor, my mentor, his name is Jeff. So whenever I hear Jeff, it's always a picture of him that pops up in my mind.
Right.
Whereas this might be obvious to people. If I hear a name like Mario, I think of Super Mario, right?
And then you tie like the person trying to memorize his face to that image.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I would choose something. Say I'm memorizing Jeff. I would choose something about your face that just pops out. It doesn't have to be complimentary. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything. It could be just like I don't know, like your eyebrows, because I noticed your eyebrows or something.
Okay. Yeah.
And then so the picture for Jeff. I mean, I could literally picture him on your eyebrows, but that's kind of like, well, why is he there? I'm probably going to forget that. So I would maybe tie it to something more, something deeper about him. Like he's a AI computer science guy, and he has like all these whiteboards in his office. When I walk in there, it's just white with markers everywhere.
Right.
So I would maybe even picture him using your eyebrows as like a surface to write all his computer science equations on.
Interesting. So that's a pretty like stark image. That's like very sticky.
Yeah, and it gets weird, right?
Yeah.
The weirder it gets is almost
easier to
better.
memorize. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting to see how you essentially create mappings. So for a digit span, do you just do the 10 digits, or you try to get 100 different mappings? You like double up the image, so you do like 2-digit numbers per mapping.
Oh, right. I actually do 3-digit numbers.
Okay, so you have 1,000 mappings.
1,000 different mappings. Yeah. I
So
started with 2.
Yeah,
but
what's 525?
That is, oh man, it's from the show. It's Ronnie from the show. I did this a while ago, the Jersey Shore. I don't know
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Ronnie from Jersey Shore. Why?
Yeah. Well, so I started with a 2-digit system, and so like 25 is an ex-girlfriend of mine, and she was kind of like, I hate to say this, Jersey Shore-ish.
Okay.
Fake tan, kind of like got an accent. She was a great person, but just a little funny in that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I expanded it out to 3-digit system, what I decided to do was to
the
make
Jersey Shore cast has 25, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So who's 625? Another character from Jersey Shore?
Yeah, so that's Sammy. That's another character from there. 825 was Snooki, if you remember her.
Yeah.
So
125, like situation, like.
No, situation's 325 actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I have like a category system. It's actually a bit helpful because, if I see the last 2 digits, I know it's part of that family of Jersey Shore people.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because like you could get a lot more efficiency if you have, your language is bigger, right? Like you have a palette of 1,000 to stack up images as opposed to 10 letters you're playing with as you're like trying to memorize thousands, these massive
it covers
patterns.
More, like you can get more digits, more bang for your buck.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. So yeah, I think if you actually have very strong memory palaces and you have good languages that you build up, I mean, it sounds like digits and cards are the most mappable because you have the complete information there. Poems are a little bit less mappable because the language set of English is like 30,000 words. So you can't make a map of every single possible word. But I guess because they're words, there's some imagery tied to them. And then faces, like we don't have as humans yet, like have really good way to descriptize, like, this eyeball shape means this, or but I guess if you were, it'd be interesting if someone could come up with a system to do that. But it sounds like that's probably the most pure, like memory association. You have to just like kind of figure out like things that catch your mind and tie it to a name.
And that's more like real life, right?
Yeah.
How often are you given a set that's so fixed? It's usually
Right.
something mixed with something else. You may not
Right.
just get a number, but maybe it's like information with numbers in it, right? So it's not necessarily so straight. So being able to practice with kind of the improvising aspect to it is more beneficial
Right.
for real life stuff, you know?
Yeah. Anything else that you think is interesting? I mean, I think those are. I mean, it seems like a good baseline system. I'm kind of curious. When you were, in peak competition form, were you just sitting at your desk, 16 hours straight? How were you doing stuff with your diet, exercise, different
Yeah.
supplementation? Like how rigorous and how thorough were your protocols? I mean, there's interesting, just from our perspective, there's interesting data around ketogenic diets, ketones, ketosis for
Yeah.
cognitive performance. I'm curious, how deep into the weeds you get there.
Yeah, back when I was really into it, I've kind of backed off a little bit, but I still train a lot. I was interested in all those different aspects. I mean, the training it wasn't 16 hours a day, but well, I mean, hardcore like doing the events like over and over again, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day when I was really leading up to a competition. But then other things I'm doing just always like I would always carry a deck of cards with me, and I'd always like thumb through it and
Right. Just
review the
yeah.
images, things like that. Or I'd be thinking about stuff that I memorized before, and that's kind of part of the training. But then physical fitness, diet, sleeping right, trying to reduce stress, all these kind of things I really tried to get into, especially leading up to these competitions. So um, my diet, my ideas about diet weren't so sophisticated as they are now. I mean, I've been wanting to try a keto diet. I haven't.
Yeah.
But I was talking to your system before that my wife and I we do the Whole30 diet
Yeah.
quite often, and that's when I do that I see a huge jump in my performance and clarity,
Right.
um, and so it's kind of like something I do now leading up to competitions to get that little edge. Um, and yeah, physical fitness, I got to work out. If I don't, I feel slow, I feel sluggish,
Right.
and with it, I just feel like on it. And I try to incorporate some of my memory stuff in my workouts. Um, yeah, I'll try anything just to switch it up or to see if it works. If you hear something might work for memory.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in, do you tend to stack your workouts before heavy memorization practices afterwards? I mean, have you felt a difference between how you structure your time?
Yeah, I would also try that. I'd see what would be better if I memorized in the morning, straight out of bed, or
Right.
post-workout, pre-workout, or in the dark, like when it's night. Not dark in the room, but like at least dark outside, versus light. And then, yeah, I mean, back then I had another job, so I I also was limited to my schedule, so I'd have to actually memorize either before work, on my lunch break, or after. I got a little sneaky. I'd do it sometimes at work, but I played with all these things, and sometimes I'd see benefits here or there. Other times, it's really just what you get, what you make your habit. I
Right.
think is really
Right.
the end of it. And the goal for me was always let me go to a competition, and I know what I'm going to get, and it's not a surprise because I've done it a million times under all different kinds of
Right. You're
situations.
relaxed. This is your
Yeah,
backyard.
because the killer for memory, especially the competition, is nerves,
Yeah.
which is going to happen, right?
Right.
You're under pressure, your heart's beating. There's people watching you with cameras, and it's a championship. It's you're,
Yeah, you're trying to be the best in the world, right? Like
yeah.
it's pressure.
So it's no matter how good you are at home, in the dark or in the quietness of your home, uh, it doesn't mean anything unless you perform it there. So
I'm curious how your success in memory has translated across everything else you do. I mean, it must be huge in terms of having a growth mindset to realize that, hey, I had, a non-remarkable memory, as you say you started off with, and now you're like,
yeah.
okay, I'm literally probably the best in the world at some of these tasks. I mean, do you feel like you could take out and conquer any cognitive challenge now? I mean that must be very confidence boosting for your
Sure.
own personal learning capacity.
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, especially, and I just got into this, I thought I still think that to some degree that anything is possible.
Right.
And I proved that to myself. I had always been interested in things growing up and kind of got into playing instruments here and trying to learn the skill there. And I'd get
Right.
decent at it, but I would never like go all the way to be a master at it.
Right.
And that always kind of frustrated me. And I was like, well, maybe I just don't have it in me to
Right.
become great at anything, just like a jack of all trades, right? Master of none. But then I did it with memory. And then I was like, you know what? That wasn't, I mean, it was a lot of work, but I did it. And it wasn't something that I naturally thought that I would just have the skill for. It's
Right.
something I worked at, right? And so with that in mind, yeah, it gives you tons of confidence because I remember thinking that I could do anything if I wanted to.
Right.
Um, Now, as I get older, I realize that there is maybe a little factor of youth, but to some extent, I mean, if you really have the motivation to do something, you can do anything, honestly. I mean, aside from being like LeBron James, where you just don't have those
I mean,
genetics.
yes, I think there's some things that are just like matters of laws of physics, but I agree with you. I think that's a big part of our community and our listenership, where I think we all realize that we can improve ourselves, and I
Yeah,
think most things are just it takes dedication and work, but why limit yourself, right? Let the laws of physics limit you is kind of the way I think about it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it applies to anything. I mean, as simple as someone who smokes and they know they don't want to smoke, but they maybe are like, it's just too hard, right? Because as soon as I stop, I just want another cigarette. And even if I go 4 weeks without a cigarette, it just takes one and then I want it again. It's like, that doesn't matter. Like, there are so many things that you can do. And it all starts with like the belief of
Yeah.
it. You could do it. Anybody can do it. And same with memory. If they wanted to be me, they could be like a million times better than me. Um, and people have proven that
Right.
in modern day memory sports.
I mean, I want to touch upon some of the other work you're working on. I mean, I want to learn a little bit more about your Alzheimer activism efforts, and it sounds like you're
Sure.
also an active mountaineer. I mean, this sounds. I mean, yeah. I mean, what's active there? I mean, it sounds like you got you're got your hands going in a lot of different places.
Yeah. I mean, learning about the memory stuff, a lot of it was not self-taught. I used resources, but a lot of it I had to figure out on my own what
Right.
worked for me. And it's funny because not many people know about memory training and that you can improve your memory. They think it's for people who are just naturally gifted. And so part of the thing I wanted to do was get that out there. And I started because of my grandmother with Alzheimer's. So I started this charity called Climb for Memory. I wanted to use it as a platform to educate people and to raise awareness for memory and brain health and Alzheimer's. And, I didn't know how to go about it other than think of the most impressive thing that I could do that I was into to get people's attention, and that seemed to be climbing. Uh, and I still think it's a pretty good way to get people's attention. Um, so mountaineering is something that I've been into for quite a while, and
So what are you
Everest had
climbing?
always,
Okay, so you're climbing Everest, or you've climbed
yeah,
Everest.
I've attempted Everest 3 times. I haven't summited,
Okay.
but I've come within 50 meters of the top. I've turned around for one reason or another. But yeah, I really like these big peaks that are long expeditions that basically boil down to you know pushing the mind. Right? These are obviously physical feats, but you'd be surprised it's more mental, I think, than physical.
Yeah, here I mean it's like a 3 month minimum type of an expedition. I mean, just getting the base camp, acclimatizing, and then
Yeah, it's a
summiting.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of it. Honestly, is sitting around just dealing with the voices in your head. You got to wait for the right weather. You got to wait for your body to slowly acclimatize.
Right.
Yeah, it's a whole process. So there's that side of things. And then in more recent times, I've been trying to develop tools and learning platforms for people to learn what I do, and to be able for them to use it on anything they want and to practice and train and
Right.
learn online. So there's an app that I've been working on called Art of Memory. And we just released some of the beta stuff, but it's got like memory palace trainers. You can organize your memory palaces. There's like system generators to create your systems for all sorts of things. There's tutorials, a forum. There's some software that we have where you can play people head to head in little memory matches.
That's cool. And I
Pretty-
think this would be a good platform for A/B testing or comping against placebo with some of our nootropics, right? Like one could actually, the notion of quantifying and benchmarking is
Yeah,
so important for all of human performance, right? Otherwise it's like,
sure.
whoa,
You don't know what you're doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're just like blind leading the blind. So I think definitely, we'll have to link towards that as like, is it a free app? Is it a mobile app? Is it a web app? How do people get on it?
It's a monthly subscription, but there's different levels. I think it's really affordable, and the resources on it are really, you're learning from the best, and the people on there are the best memory people in the world. So I think it's great. I think it's innovative. There's some other kind of learning tools out there, but I think there's something special about this. So I would encourage your listeners, viewers, to go check it out.
Art of
It's
Memory.
artofmemory.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the program. I know you have to run, so we'd love to, stay in touch and be supportive in any way that we can help some of the efforts. I think, Alzheimer's is on the flip side of enhancing cognitive performance, but I think on memory and human performance, always a spectrum. If we can potentially help enhance cognitive performance, I think, delaying or preventing cognitive decline is just very much the other side of that coin. So appreciate the good work you're doing in all those areas.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers. All right. Take care, Nelson.
See you, Jeff.
Hey,
Take
peace.
it easy.
Bye. Fun conversation with Nelson. I think it's cool that he really shared, and we're able to just like actually give me real examples of, okay, 525 is Ronnie from Jersey Shore. I think is awesome. But it also made it a lot more tangible for me to realize what these people are doing. Okay, like a Seven of Clubs is Batman, like King of Hearts is his dad. Like this seems like approachable from a layman like myself into getting into competitive memory. I love to keep track of Nelson and his efforts moving forward. Definitely some interesting potential collaboration around nootropics and memory. So this is wrapping up, close to the end of the year in 2017. Zilla and I have had a phenomenal year running this podcast over the last year and a half. Our audience has exploded to a point where I think we get really funny stories of us like seeing people on the street and different cafes, giving us very kind and warm words. So hopefully we'd like to continue what we're doing. As always, please leave us feedback if there's any way we can improve our programming, our guests, our style. Very open to that. As always, we appreciate any subscriptions and ratings and all of that you guys are doing. As always, if you like this episode, subscribe on SoundCloud, YouTube, Google, Apple, and Spotify. If you don't hear from me until the new year, Happy New Year's, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year. Best of luck in 2018. See ya.